Hi and welcome to this video about design restrictions. Here I will talk about external factors that will affect your design and also about what is important to think about when it comes to role-playing games as a form. Let's start out with talking about the form. Role-playing games are co-created stories where each participant takes part in telling the story. Each participant will also have a different story to tell and will have experienced different stories when you talk to them after. This is called subjective diegesis in role-playing game theory. And this means that it's important to make sure that you have no single main character in your design. Each participant needs to be able to feel that they are the main character in their story. We are so used to stories with one main character that it's a very easy trap to fall in, but no one wants to be an extra in someone else's story. So you need to ask yourself, who gets to be in the spotlight? If you are working with scenes and just a few characters, you can try to make sure that each character gets a scene where they are in the spotlight, just to make sure everyone is getting focus. Another effect of the co-creation is that you, as the designer, game master, have less control over the story and the game compared to, for example, digital games, TV shows, movies, theater plays, or books. Your players might take the design and run in a totally different direction than you had planned. So how do you handle this? You can have this as part of your design, for example by just designing a setting and leaving most other things up to the players, like a sandbox game. This can be risky if the players want different things, since then they might work against each other. Or, if you want a bit more control, you can start them off and then just go with whatever the players are doing and just feed into it and design on the fly. But you can also just try to design around it, maybe by working with specific short scenes, so the players won't have time to go too far off from your plan, like a railroaded design. And this is also relevant for games that don't have a game master, and we will talk more about that in the course Transformative Game Design 1. You can also try to game master during runtime to steer play. This we will talk more about in the course Transformative Game Design 2, where we focus a bit more on implementation. But no matter what, you need to be prepared for your players to come up with things that you just didn't plan for. What is the form actually good at? When I say I work as a game designer, a lot of people think about digital games. And some of the things in designing digital games and analog games are very much alike. Thinking about meaningful choices, affordances for the players, and many times story. But there are certain things that work better in a digital form or as a tabletop than as a LARP, for example. Especially when it comes to the amount of work the designer organizer needs to put in relation then to what the players actually get out of it. And one such thing is a find the thing plot. No matter if the thing is a clue, a treasure, or a hidden message, this is a lot easier to do in a digital game or a tabletop game than it is in a LARP. In a digital game, you can put it into the code and then it's solved. In a tabletop, you can describe it and let the players then either find the thing or not, depending on what they do. In a LARP, this means a lot of work for the organizers. I have run LARPs where one of the things that the children should do was to go look for the magic objects. This meant that we had to be at the location way before the start to go and hide all the objects. Because you don't want your players to see where you are hiding the things. and there are always some players showing up early. You also need to hide the objects well enough that they are not found by someone else by mistake, but they also need to be easy enough to find if you actually know what you are looking for or have the right info. You also need to, as an organizer, remember where you hid all the things. Because if the player doesn't find everything during the game, then you need to be able to go back out there and find it yourself. And if you have thought about all of this and that works out, how many players get to actually find the thing? Is it just relevant for 2 out of 20, 50 or 100 players? Or is it a very important part of the plot for all characters, even if it's actually just meant to be found by one player? And what happens then if they don't find it? Will this become a bottleneck where everyone needs to wait for the thing to be found before they can do anything else? You might also, if working with children, not want to encourage them to hide things, because then they might start to hide other things to be smart. And then when you ask them about where the thing is, you get answers like, behind the large tree next to the rock, when you are standing out in a forest. Yes, I have been in that situation. I'm not saying you should never have this kind of plot in a LARP, but you should think about what it means for the organizers in terms of time and work in relation to what the players and what players actually get out of it. If it is about hiding things in certain books in a library, that can be a lot easier, because then you can write down what books you put the things in, and then the chance that someone would find it by accident is very small, since there are a lot of books in most libraries. But then again, you might have someone that's not part of the game showing up and borrowing that specific book in the middle of the LARP. Yes, I have been in that situation too. On the other hand, if you're doing a digital game and want to convey information through an interactive conversation, that is actually quite hard to do well. Often here you work with conversation trees. So as a player, you initiate a conversation and you then get like 3 to 5 choices about what to say to the other person. You pick one, and then they will answer, and you get a new choice of 3 to 5 things to say. And then you do this maybe 4 times before the conversation is done. As a player, you don't really feel like you had a lot of choices. And if you pick the wrong thing because you misunderstood something, then you need to click your way through it all again. For the designer though, this is a lot of work. Even if there are just 3 options on each part, if you then don't tie them together, then you actually need to write 120 different answers. In a LARP, you could just ask another player to help out. For example, by instructing them that if anyone comes to them and asks about the queen, they should beat around the bush for a little while, and then they should tell the players that they have heard that the queen never takes meetings on evenings of the full moon, and as it happens, that is tonight. Then the players will get a good interaction, and if they come back, they will not get the exact same conversation. The only thing to think about is that you might want to make sure that the information you want to get out there is spread out to more than one character, in case that player would get sick. And this of course also works in tabletop games, where you as a game master can play the character yourself, or by distributing information among your players. Now, let's go into some of the external factors that might affect your design a bit more. Time. What time frame do you have? Are you going to do a 15-minute long LARP experience for a try out different cultural expressions day? Are you doing a tabletop campaign that should run for a year once a week? Are you doing a week-long LARP where you have no off-game time designed for? Are you doing a one-off tabletop experience but that's supposed to run for a full day? If you are designing for a short experience, it can be very intense. You can do like in a movie where you skip to the interesting parts. But if you're doing a week-long LARP, then you probably need to have downtime. People will need to sleep and go to the bathroom and just have periods that aren't crazy action-packed the whole time. Or maybe you want to explore silence or boredom in your experience. And then it becomes very hard if it's super short. And if you want to have a higher pace, then maybe it's better to do a shorter experience instead. Sometimes you can decide the frames, but sometimes someone else does. Like when working with edu-larp, I usually had to adjust the time after the school schedules. Sometimes we had children that would go home by school bus. Then we couldn't be 10 minutes late. We had to be done exactly on time. And sometimes we couldn't move their lunch break time because of the school cafeteria's schedule. And then we had to design around that. The next thing is location. Does your design require any specific location? Maybe you found the perfect bunker for your post-apocalyptic LARP just to realize there are no sanitation solutions. Or maybe you want your LARP to be runnable in many different locations. Or if you want to do a tabletop scenario with a horror theme, then running it in a park in the middle of the day might not really help with setting the mood. Location can also affect accessibility. So no matter if you are designing for a specific location or for a more general approach where the game could be modified to match many locations, it is something that will have an effect on your actual game design. And then we have the players. Your target audience. Your design will be different depending on who you have in your target audience. If you are designing for experienced players, then they might have more pre-knowledge and want more freedom. They know what is expected of them. There can also be big differences between experienced players depending on what their experiences are. Maybe they are experts on this specific role-playing game world, or maybe they have played many different types of games. Or maybe they have played games in many different parts of the world and/or in different traditions. Experienced players often come with a clear expectation of what they want to get. Beginners, on the other hand, often don't know what to expect. They also don't know what is expected of them. What are they to do? Then you need to design frames where they can get help with seeing what they can do and getting to know the form. Many times when you design, you might have a mix of experienced players and beginners. If you have enough experienced players, you will get a herd competence. When this is the case, the new players can watch the experienced ones and will pick up on what they are doing and how to play. Then you don't need to design as much for the beginners specifically, since they will pick it up along the way. It might still be a good idea to have some parts of the framing before the game that are aimed especially to the new beginners, where they get a chance to ask questions and such. I also want to mention children here. Designing for children of different ages is different to designing for adults. Children can take your ideas and run with them all over. And this is wonderful and fun, but also sometimes hard. Younger children still haven't got as much experience with world, and therefore they don't always have the same frames of conceptions as adults have. This means they might start talking about TV in the middle of a medieval game because they don't know that a TV wasn't around in the Middle Ages. But they can also come up with amazing stories and parts that you would never have thought about. There is a big difference between different age groups for children. Even though, like, what that group contains can vary between different cultures, and also just between rural or central areas of the same town. I will now talk about mandatory versus optional participation. This is mostly relevant for certain types of educational games, but I'm sure there are other settings where this also might come up. When designing games for formal education, many times participation is mandatory and not optional. This will affect the design. When you choose to sign up for a LARP or a role-playing game, you are there because you want to, because you're interested and want to engage, at least at some level. This is not always the case in educational settings. Therefore, you need to think about this already in your design. You can have a backup plan for those that really don't want to participate. Maybe they get to be with another class or do homework instead. Depending on why they don't want to participate, you might want to handle it in different ways. Usually, I recommend not letting them stay around and watch the others, since this often just leads to them judging the others, and that affects the whole climate in the room. But if they are positive and curious, but feeling unsure and want to see a bit more before, then that's a different thing. Or if there are some kind of disability involved, so they only can partake in certain parts. You also need to design for the mandatory participation also in the runtime design. But things you can do here include designing ways for players to choose their engagement level, for example, through different types of characters. Have ways to opt in and out of parts of the game. Have different types of gameplay available, since not all players will like the same type of play. For example, have different quests where some are more physical, some are more social, and some are more intellectual. And, as always, design for safety. Medium. Are you doing your game online or in real life? Do you want your design to be run online, in real life, or maybe both ways? This will affect your framing as well as the game design. A lot of workshop exercises won't work online, but online you do get access to digital tools that can give you other possibilities instead. And that also goes for safety. When designing for being able to run a game online, it is important to think about the tools, but also the player's experience with the tools. Sometimes it might be better to pick a more well-known tool, even if it doesn't work as well for what you want to do, just to make it easier for people to participate. If there are too many new programs or apps for your players to learn and to be able to play the game, they won't be able to focus on the game experience. Instead, all their cognitive capacity will be going to trying to learn and understand the new tools instead. One thing that is very nice with running a game online is that you can work with text and chat in interesting ways while playing the game. You can also play around with filters to make you look like your character in a way that is fast and easy compared to crafting or just having a picture or describing your character. And this can help a lot with immersion for some players. On the other hand, it will be harder for other players to get immersed since you can have things from your ordinary day life popping up and disturbing you the whole time, compared to if you were meeting physically in a defined place. To summarize, we have talked about the following design restrictions: no single main character, less control, what the form is good at, time, location, target audience, and medium. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening.